And we are live.
Awesome, thank you very much. So I'd like to call to order the City of Beaumont Special Council meeting of Thursday, July 30th. Welcome, it's great to be here on this fabulous Thursday night as we discuss mandatory mask protocol. So first things first, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on Treaty 6 territory, and that whether you be of Inuit, Métis, First Nations descent, everybody is important to us, and we'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on their land. Could I have a member of council move to adopt the agenda as presented? We only have one item to consider tonight. Councillor Hendricks.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 That carries unanimously. That brings us to business item 3A, mandatory mask protocol discussion. Turn it over to admin.
Okay, before I hand this over to Tika for the presentation, I just wanted to provide an explanation. And this thing had many moving parts to it and some time-sensitive information that we were trying to gather. So we apologize to council and to the members of public for not getting it posted until this morning, but we wanted to have the most current and accurate information. So with that said, I will turn it over to Tika, who has done a good job of pulling this stuff together, and I'm sure will do a great job presenting. Thanks, Tika.
Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen here, so bear with me. And here we go. Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, but no shared screen yet.
Oh, no shared screen. Okay, 1 second. Share. How about now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Got her.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and the public. In an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19, many jurisdictions across Canada and in our region have introduced mandatory face coverings in public places. Tonight's presentation will introduce Beaumont administration's recommended response to mandatory face coverings. Scientific evidence is not conclusive. However, a cohort of studies show that when combined with measures such as physical distancing, regular hand washing, and isolating when sick, face coverings in public can be an effective tool in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Dr. Dina Hinshaw, Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, and the Public Health Agency of Canada recommend people wear non-medical masks in public places. Surveys done by other municipalities in our region and across the country have shown public support for mandated face coverings. Beaumont administration has also been working closely with local businesses to respond to the pandemic, and in those discussions have learned that many businesses are also supportive of mandatory face coverings. With COVID-19 cases on the rise in the province, proactively mandating face coverings may help keep Beaumont open and encourage members of our community to feel more comfortable accessing services. Beaumont administration is recommending council give first reading to a bylaw mandating face coverings on Beaumont Transit when it resumes and in indoor municipal facilities accessible to the public. This would place Beaumont within option 3 of our decision matrix shown by the yellow star on the screen. Administration is also proposing a review of mandatory face coverings in all indoor public places, including private business, as a next step. This would be considered option 4 of the decision matrix and is shown by a red star on the screen. If council supports the recommendation, administration would bring back recommendations from that review to council at a date that suits council, including any amendments to the bylaw. Bylaw 984-20, temporary face coverings bylaw. The proposed bylaw includes exemptions for those who are unable to safely wear a mask covering or face covering, excuse me, such as young children or those with medical contradictions. The term face coverings is used to provide the public with flexibility and simply means any barrier that covers the mouth, nose, and chin. Implementation will include a public awareness and education component. Non-medical masks are currently available in many locations in our community for purchase or free of charge. This week, 1,200 of the non-medical masks we received from the province have been distributed to the seniors community and local businesses. Although the bylaw does include penalties if necessary, administration is recommending a supportive enforcement approach whenever possible. And the bylaw will be temporary. It is proposed to be in effect until October 31st, 2020, and requires a council amendment to extend that period. In closing, Beaumont administration is proposing mandatory face coverings be considered a pragmatic and proactive response to ensure the health and safety of others in the community. That concludes my presentation. Administration looks forward to council direction on this matter and is happy to take any questions council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the presentation this evening and the comprehensive document that was provided to us. Before I open it up to questions from members of council, I would like to say I'm still disappointed, like many of my mayoral colleagues around the region and the province, that the province has not stepped up to provide guidelines to municipalities on this subject, and that we're sort of floating by ourselves. Having said that, Dr. Hinshaw has strongly recommended masks as a public health measure that would enhance our COVID-19 response. It's in addition to, not a replacement for, the current public health guidelines of keeping your hands washed, 2 meters of social distancing, etc. And so having this discussion today, I think, is a pragmatic approach for the city of Beaumont. But one question I do have is, currently we're sitting at 0 active cases. Does it make sense to take this step now? Or do we want to, how should I put it, rewrite the bylaw to put triggers into place to trigger it when we do have enough cases to warrant actually this approach?
I can answer that question. So I think that that's really up to council at this point. We did do a pretty comprehensive jurisdictional review. Some communities have tried to put in triggers. However, none of them are really based on anything scientific, which is how we've based a lot of our decisions to date. And so, it would be up to council whether you wanted to go that route. I will say, though, that we have seen other communities, actually Nova Scotia as an example, the entire province has 0 cases, and they've still decided to go this route just because they think it's a proactive approach. So I don't know if anyone else on administration has anything to add to that, but.
Mayor Stewart, members of council, yeah, I think you nailed it, the last piece there for sure, Tika. We're proposing a proactive approach. You're right, we have 0 cases in Beaumont. We're very fortunate, but they're out there. Another 113 today in Alberta, so that's why this recommendation.
Come on. Okay, open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
And maybe just to build on that slightly, so 0 cases that we know of, for starters, right? So there definitely could be people in our community who may be carrying it, just haven't got that test. So I just want to clarify that. With regards to triggers, appreciate the point from Tika there. There's no science to whether it's 10 or 15 or like where would we pick that number from. So I think a proactive approach is important. And then the other piece is, obviously we're hoping to still attract people from outside the community to come in to our community. And if they're coming in from Edmonton or in those areas where there are a higher number of cases, I think that's why we want to have this bylaw in place. So just an initial comment back on that, on the triggers and why do it now. So I support the proactive approach. I've got other comments, but I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
There are questions from other members of council on this bylaw or others. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Van Newton.
Thank you, Worship. I noticed there's a number of exemptions that include essentially bars and restaurants when we're eating and drinking, and what's the other one? Oh, I'm sorry. People taking part in exercise in a recreation facility, sporting activities and exercise. Could you explain to me why we have those exemptions?
Yeah, so I'll start off and then I'll hand it over to the fire chief to answer specifically to our bylaws. So one of the things we also considered was that we were trying to be in alignment with the region. So there are a number of bylaws in the region that have similar exemptions. So with that, I'll see if Everett has anything to add to that.
Thank you, Tika, and good evening, Council. With respect to the bylaw and the exemptions that are in place, this bylaw is only for city-owned and operated facilities. The exemptions for eating or restaurants within our facilities are exactly that. Beaumont Sports and Rec Center opens up. Should there be a canteen or a restaurant inside, this would provide visitors to the business the opportunity while consuming food or beverage to remove their face covering, consume their food, return their face covering, and then carry on with their business within our facility. That's the rationale behind the removal of the face covering while eating. With respect to activities, so physical activities and such, when we have our youth or any users of our facilities who are actively engaged in physical activity, face coverings may restrict or impede their abilities to enjoy that sport. Protocols are in place with other agencies, or pardon me, the sporting agencies within our community already to ensure distancing takes place, or at least checks of welfare, i.e. temperatures and such, have taken place as well. So giving our residents the opportunity to remove their face coverings while using an ice rink or playing ball hockey or soccer, that's the intent behind it.
Okay, thank you. I'm just concerned by that because I mean, it seems to me that certainly for eating and drinking, you have to remove. You can't have a face covering on. It's simply not possible to do it. So there's an extra exposure there. Whilst you're consuming the beverage or the food, but at the same time, I guess minimizing that is better than not making not wearing a face covering at all while you're in the facility. But the exercise facility the exercise bit puzzles me. It seems to me extremely likely that, you know, I'm thinking of my own experience in a spin class where I'm sweating like crazy, where heart rate's elevated, I'm panting heavily. Anybody within 2 meters of me is going to be exposed to droplets, and as I am from all of theirs. And if a face covering reduces that and helps protect everybody in the room, then, and we're mandating it in other places, then I'm thinking that it should be mandated there. It's quite possible to perform. I'm sure I don't need to tell you. I'm sure you've done a VO2 test at some time, Chief Cook, with a face mask on and laboring to the full of your capacity. So it is possible. Yeah, it might interfere with some people's enjoyment of it, but then wearing a face mask in public places or in a facility will interfere with the enjoyment of a lot of other activities as well. We don't do it because it's convenient and nice. We do it because, or we're asking people to do it in order to protect others from the spread of a virus. So I'm not sure why, for instance, physical activity is exempted, and to bring us into line with other municipalities, well, that's, you know, they have to decide what they're going to do. I'm not interested in doing it because somebody else did it.
If I may, Your Worship, just as a follow-up.
Of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Including the provision of removing face coverings for physical activity was a recommendation by our lawyer, also to include. The bylaw has received legal review, as well as it's promoted by the province of Alberta as well. But I want to assure council that when a individual, should they be on a sheet of ice or a playing field, are concluding their activities, as they leave that field, they are to return that face covering, or at least the intent of the bylaw is that they return the face covering back onto their person as they exit the field and they're no longer active. And let's say they go to a change room or a washroom. So it is only during times of physical activity on a sheet of ice, or again in our field house, for example.
Okay. So if I'm going into my spin class, then I wear the mask, do this, take it off to do the class, and then put it back on again. Is essentially what you're describing.
That is the intent behind the bylaw and that exemption. Yes.
Okay,
And one of the other things to note, just for physical, like fitness activities in our fitness center, there still is physical spacing, right? So we're not going to be right beside each other. We're going to have that barrier. So the mask is when you're getting within that 2-meter barrier, that's also another benefit to that, right? So we're still physically spacing and physically separating during that spin class. So you're not right adjacent to somebody else.
Understand that, but if we're involved in vigorous physical activity, you need more than 2 meters to be out of the way of all the droplets. Let's put it that way. That's exactly the time I would expect to be wearing some kind of extra protection. But thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Daniluk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to back up out of the details a bit here and just put my support forward for, the response option that mandatory face coverings mandatory face coverings on transit and no face accessible to put my support behind that tonight. And I think that approaches are personally not willing to wait for someone's brother, sister, aunt, uncle, mom, dad to look at a statistical piece of paper, sick or otherwise. So therefore, that's where I support.
Is that garbled for everybody but me? Sorry, Councillor Van Newkirk, that was all garbled. You got to start again. No, you're not. Yeah, I can't understand a word you're saying. Okay, we'll give Councillor Van Newkirk a chance to fix his audio. Moving on to Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Is that volume any better? It wasn't just his reception, and we're better. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tika, Ms. Brougham. Great job on the report. Very concise, very clear, easy to read, and provides great information and a nice balanced approach to the narrative. I agree with Mayor Stewart. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating that we ourselves are now in this situation to have to determine a bit of a health policy, but it is what it is. We are where we are. And right now, it seems that all we can do as a council is give the best information we can at this point in time and make a good decision. So I like the balanced approach where we're looking at mandatory masks within city facilities as opposed to imposing that businesses and private citizens wear masks throughout the municipality. So I think at this step and point in time, option 3 to me does seem the most viable at this point in time, which is the indoor municipality facilities open to the public and Beaumont Transit. So I won't go any further than that. I'll let other people jump in on that situation. Thank you, Mayor Stewart.
Councillor Barnhart, before we start into round 2. Oh, Councillor Van Newkirk. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks everyone. And some of the questions or the comments I totally agree with. I wish we weren't in this situation, but we are here. And just a couple of questions. When we're talking about the municipal public facilities, can you just run through the list for me again? I want to make sure I understand. It's covering all of our rec facilities. Tika, perhaps you have the list of facilities, how many there are and which ones are we covered by this?
In the bylaw.
Through you, to Councilor Barnhart. Actually, Everett, do you mind answering? I think you might have it right in front of you.
Certainly. Most certainly, I'd be more than happy to answer that question for you. Good evening, Councillor Barnhart. City facilities are defined as anywhere that the public has implied right or access to. So for example, city facilities defined as City Hall, our library, the Ken Nickel Regional Recreation Center, Chantal Berube Youth Center, our fire hall, the RCMP detachment, our Collaborative Business Innovation Center, or COVIC, Beaumont Sports and Recreation Center, our Beaumont Community Center, or CCBCC, our Family Community Support Services Office, so that's FCSS, Early Learning Child Care Center, School Age Site, and our operations building on Township Road 510.
Thank you. And I did hear Councillor Van Newkirk, I think, directing me to the bylaw, and I didn't get to that page. We just received this and I was busy all day. So my apologies for not getting to the detail. But it raises a question around childcare. And so this bylaw would then suggest that anyone over 2 years old needs to be wearing a face mask?
Hello, I'll take that, Councillor Barnhart. We have specific protocols in place for the early learning childcare and after school site, and those would remain. So no, the children would not be required to wear a mask. However, if a member of the public was to enter that facility, they would. Right now, our protocols don't allow even the parents to enter that facility. So there would be no effect to the children or the childcare providers.
And just to be clear, we're only talking at this level of the facilities that we are operating. Our own facilities, so private daycare centers and schools, et cetera, would not be included in this bylaw.
That's correct.
At this stage.
Yes.
One other question, if I may, while I have the floor. I think I read in here that supportive enforcement rather than punitive enforcement. Perhaps Chief Cook, you could explain what that means?
Most certainly. Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. So the intent behind the bylaw and our enforcement activities would be to be proactive and to encourage our residents and the visitors to Beaumont to wear a face covering when entering our facilities. We wouldn't come out the gate heavy-handed ticketing or enforcing through a $50 violation fine anyone not wearing face coverings. Again, we'd be working with and encouraging our residents. So on a proactive approach, that is the direction we would take. Again, our fines are minimal, set at $50, which mirrors many of our residents. But again, that's a last resort option. We don't like to go that avenue for most anything unless it's warranted off the get-go.
Thank you very much. And as it stands, I support the direction. Not sure I want to go any further than this, but I think it's warranted right now. Thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk, you logged out, logged back in. You want to give this another go? See if it's any better? Okay, we'll see if we can get him phoned in. Councillor Hendricks, we haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you. Pretty well all the thoughts that I had have already been explained here this evening and well addressed. One thing I'd like to add is it'd be nice to perhaps send a letter under signature from our mayor to the province saying we feel that this matter really belongs in their purview and not ours. We do need provincial leadership in these areas, and this is a health matter. So I'm quite unhappy that we're being provided with this requirement to have to satisfy what is clearly a health issue within our municipality that should be governed by our province through provincial orders. So I'd like to have something sent to them on behalf of our council that speaks to that. And I just remind viewers and others that years ago we had the non-smoking bylaw, which had a patchwork of answers to the whole region, and ultimately we finally had to pull one that the whole region could work together because it was such a dictionary of issues. Depending on which jurisdiction you're in, you had to know what was allowed or what was not allowed, and you don't want that happening here with masks. If you drive to Beaumont, here's the rules. You drive to Edmonton, here's the rules. Spruce Grove, here are the rules. So here are the rules. Well, that doesn't work, and that was shown clearly in the smoking bylaw issue. So I'm hoping that, and we can hear it now from the big city mayors and others that they're starting to make the case to our province that, listen, you people need to look after this. Give us provincial orders. If you want to split it up between rural and urban, fine. But don't leave us in this patchwork of issues so that you have to have a handbook depending on where you travel in this province regarding masks. So thank you.
No, thank you very much. And I agree on the letter, and we'll make a motion to do exactly that towards the end here and get that official council sanction, because I saw some heads nodding through that. I see Councillor Van Newkirk is with us on the phone, but can somebody unmute him and we'll see if we can get his first thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, most of my comments have been covered. So just want to indicate my support for the bylaw as it is proposed here for the mandatory masks on transit and within the municipal buildings as described in the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Van Newkirk. Just before we get going around round two, I got one more question, then I'll ask if somebody's prepared to make the motion. Well, I can support getting behind transit because that's a pretty enclosed environment. I got to admit, I am struggling with our city facilities and not making it mandatory anywhere else. Why just our city facilities, and not anywhere else? It seems like a bit of a half measure or a bit of a lead by example thing, maybe. I don't know, but it just seems sort of something that's halfway there.
Sorry, Mayor Stewart, members of council. We believe this is a first step in the facilities that we quote control or own or operate. We didn't think, and we would like to study it a little bit further, we didn't think we were in a position to start imposing this on our public spaces and our business owners in the city of Beaumont. But clearly this is council's decision and they can choose to go that way. But we thought this was a first step with obviously some communications on awareness, and hopefully people will abide by that. And of course, the masks are strongly being encouraged to be worn by the province, and we're hoping people would take it upon themselves to follow that.
Fair enough. And I know that part of the recommendations tonight are to undertake a bit of a review and perhaps gain some public input on this. Is there a member of council willing to move the recommendation? Councillor Munkoff-Swain? Nope. Councillor Daniluk?
So moved, your worship.
All right, discussion. Thank you, Councillor Daniluk. Discussion on the motion.
That was a hand up. Sorry about that. I was delayed there.
Well, I did. Councillor Munkoff-Swain and you both had your hands up, so I didn't know. Anyway, Councillor Munkoff-Swain, you were next on the speakers list.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't think it would be responsible of me to move a motion that I wasn't quite sure I support, so I'll get to that. I really want to pick up on your comment about public versus private facilities, but there are two just weeds questions that I just need to ask. I apologize in advance. When we talk about the as part of the bylaw on page 13, we talk about the exceptions. So the first exception, I have a question around. So I recognize our skate park is outside. I don't see that on here. Obviously, a spot where people congregate a lot of the time, close proximity. Had we thought of that and chose to exclude that? I'm just curious as to why I don't see that here.
Thank you. Number one, the skate park wasn't chosen because it is an outside facility. Yes, it is a city facility. However, again, it is outside. Number two, it is typically physical activity that takes place at our skate park, which also falls under one of our exemptions, as found on page 3 of the bylaw under section 5. That's the rationale behind not including the skate park.
Yeah, thanks for that. I figured you'd say that, and obviously you're up and down past that skate park a lot. Yes, there are a lot of people using physical activity there and quote unquote exercising. A lot of people also just hanging out together, right? It gets very busy there. So I think it'd be an interesting spot to monitor. So I don't have any recommendations on the bylaw here, but just to acknowledge that that's a really densely populated spot for our kids, our youth. The second one under exceptions is 5J, and appreciate Councillor Van Newkirk actually pointing this out to me as we're driving in. So it says an exception is elected members of council for the purpose of attending a scheduled meeting. So I guess I'm curious as to why we make we're making a bylaw for everyone except ourselves. And just curious if we're talking about private meetings, but if we're talking about council meetings and public are coming in, why the distinction there?
Excellent, thank you. The intent behind exception 5J, elected members of council for the purpose of attending a scheduled meeting, is for when council comes back into chambers and there's physical distancing, or pardon me, physical barriers between yourselves and the public in place, that would not require council at that time to don a face mask. Should council attend any one of our facilities as a resident of the city of Beaumont, you would fall underneath this bylaw and you would be required to wear a face covering.
Yeah, thank you. I think I get the distinction, I get the definition. I just don't know if I follow the logic. So, I mean, there are the other places that we're asking these folks to go to. There's a lot of the times there's the face, there's the plexiglass, all that sort of stuff that is potentially going to be in the way. So I'm just curious as to, and I get what you're trying to do. I appreciate it. Like, we don't want to be sitting up there in that meeting where we've got that space, we've got a shield in front of us with the mask on. But it sounded, it was kind of weird that it was kind of in this bylaw. I get what you're trying to do, but I'm not sure it fits. Or maybe we can amend it to explain that this is, where we've already got those face shields there and we're physically separated and all that sort of stuff. It just seems strange to call this one out.
Fair enough. We can always bring back an amendment to this exception, either strike it or modify it as council directs. That's something we can do for council for sure.
Thanks. And I don't have any great words to give you, and you'll probably be appreciative of that. So I'll leave that to you guys to craft. You can hear what I'm trying to get to here, just to try to explain it more than strike it out. So I'll leave that with you. But then, Your Worship, if you don't mind, I'll go to your comment about public spaces versus private spaces. I just find it interesting that we clearly value people's. It sounds like we've got support here for the public spaces, and we're showing that we value people's safety here in public spaces. Yet by not putting it into the private businesses, are we saying that we don't care about public safety there? I'm not quite sure why we. I think the mayor hit the nail on the head. We're half in on this. If someone's just as likely to catch it as they are coming into City Hall as they are going to Sobeys, right? So I'm just curious, and I really appreciate the fact that you're going for you're not going for a punitive enforcement, and you're going for, I think you called it, supportive enforcement, and certainly I think we're all aligned with that. But it just struck me as if we're truly looking at trying to look after the health of our citizens, then why wouldn't we make this across the board in those public places and those private places where it can be? And you've seen the exemptions that other places have, whether it's if you're worried about restaurants and all that sort of stuff, obviously you got to wear it until you get to your booth, and then when you're at your booth you're allowed to take it off and that sort of thing, so you can have a beer and a burger. But I'm curious on other people's thoughts. Obviously the mayor triggered that. Appreciate the comment, but I'm curious on council's thoughts as to why we value it in public spaces and not necessarily in private spaces. Thank you.
So through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Monkhoff-Swain, if you don't mind, just quickly to address the first comment, I think that administration could take that as direction, the skate park, to include that within our review, to look at not just indoor but outdoor, because it is just a review. The second comment, if I may, I think that we don't want to presuppose what administration is going to come back on a recommendation for private indoor places. I think the intent of bringing forward this option 3 right now and looking closely at option 4 is that we want to have more time to consider what implementation looks like, and also just to touch base with some of those most impacted stakeholders. So I don't know if administration has anything further to add, but.
Explain the distinction though. Why? So I get maybe need more time, but what's the distinction between public versus private? The time frames are still the same either way, right? Obviously you've got a different mechanism to communicate that, but I still can't see why we wouldn't. You've asked us here to give you a recommendation and go back and study it. I think you've seen all the studies. I think you get the information. You know what the information is out there. You've seen draft bylaws of this. So I'm just, and I recognize you're pulling to this together last minute, and this is tough to get. So I appreciate that. But I think if we're looking to protect the safety of our residents here, if we think masks are important, right, which it sounds like we do in public, I think we need to. My preference anyway would be to push this back and get you to bring back a more comprehensive bylaw that covers the whole city. So again, I'll defer to others on council, but yeah, I don't get the distinction of why. It just seems to me like it's a timing thing. We didn't have enough time to get it done. And that may be unfair, but I don't think that's good policy.
Through your worship, if I may. So maybe the way I worded that was not quite the way I intended it to be interpreted. I think it is council's prerogative to go to option 4 if that is direction you would like to give administration. When we come back for second and third reading, we can have those amendments if that is the wish of council. I think that administration, we were trying to find a ground that we felt was the best way forward at this time with that option to review. But it is always within council's purview to make that distinction or that direction. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything further to add.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I would add is part of our thinking is that we can control our facilities and put the safety measures in place to protect the public. And what we're seeing across our city is businesses are doing that as well. And we wanted to leave that control within the businesses. You see the case numbers in Beaumont. We wanted an opportunity to go and talk to more of these businesses and really try and stay out of their business because they are taking the safety measures. So as Tika said, right, wrong, or indifferent, and certainly council's prerogative to change that, but that's just a little bit more in our thinking.
Appreciate that. I think I'd close by saying, Dr. Hinshaw doesn't say wear masks in public places, right? She says wear masks everywhere. I recognize that there's a lot of engagement that we need to do with the business community. This is coming at us pretty quickly. Doesn't mean that we can't still do that engagement. By the time we bring this next bylaw, the next round back, that's my view. I think I've shared enough here. So Mayor, I'll let you go. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple clarifications. What we're asking, the motion currently on the floor is that council gives first reading to bylaw 98420, temporary face covering, to enact mandatory face coverings on Beaumont Transit and all municipally owned facilities accessible to the public. The next motion, because I'm going to separate it, would be that council direct administration to conduct a review regarding the mandatory use of face coverings in all indoor public spaces, including private businesses, and prepare draft amendments to the bylaw for council's consideration to a date. So those are the two things that we're going to look at tonight, plus a third motion to send a letter to the provinces to go for. So tonight we're just talking about, like I'll be honest with you, I support transit. I'm still struggling with the case count and when they're public, so I'm going to support triggers in round 2, but I'll support first reading tonight just to get the process in motion. But because I really am more in favor of the Cochrane model, how they structured their bylaw to what they're going. So I will leave it up to members of council for their comment, but honestly, first reading, it's just first reading. It gets the process in motion, and then we'll talk about amendments and what that could look like. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart, followed by Van Newkirk and Hendricks. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Reference has already been made to punitive, not having punitive enforcement, and as it's currently worded, I don't think I can support the bylaw, and my difficulty is regarding the levying of a fine for non-compliance. To me, based on to actually levy it, to use the full force of law to levy a fine on a resident, based on and the science here is the science suggests. I'm afraid that's not enough for me. I'd like the science is beyond reasonable doubt before I start fining people for non-compliance. So I'd like to. I'm willing to consider. I'm willing to support non-admission to facilities or denial of service in the event of non-compliance. I think those are reasonable, but I'm not willing to support a fine. So I won't support this unless the fine's taken out, or alternatively, I guess we could reduce the fine to 0. And then if the bylaw passes, we can at some later date change the fine if the science supports that. Allusion has already been made to not supporting this through punitive measures such as fines. So I'm thinking that it doesn't actually make any practical difference to its application. And there isn't a question here. That's all I wanted to say.
Fair enough. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for clarifying that it is first reading, because to say I have my mind totally made up on this would not be correct. I have lots of misgivings, as has been expressed by all of the councillors. But I wonder if when it comes back, we might hear a little bit more about a public awareness around the wearing of masks, because I don't like the punitive measures at all. And I don't like the fact that it's just the public facilities and not the private ones. It isn't logical. On the other hand, I don't think businesses ought to be in the business of enforcing our bylaws. So I really have misgivings about how this is all coming together. For one thing, I think it's coming together quickly. I understand the politics behind it, and I understand what's going on in the region. And I do want to see that regional cohesiveness. But I am feeling a bit of that we're doing this in a knee-jerk kind of way. And so I want us to bring it back and to be thoughtful about it. And I want it to be successful. So Councillor Stout, I think you make some really good points about, do we have to have a fine? I don't think we have any bylaws that are enforced that don't have some kind of a fine, but that's a question I'm going to ask the administration. Can we have a bylaw without a fine?
Thank you, Councillor Bernhardt. I wouldn't see why we could not have a bylaw without a fine attached to it. I don't know of any currently enforced with the City of Beaumont or any other municipalities. That's not to say they're not out there. That is something we could research and bring back. Unfortunately, I don't have anything else to share on that at this point. I'm sorry.
Okay, because that could be one of, if we pass the second motion on amendments, that could be one of the things that we take back and look at for information purposes when we come back and look at second and third reading, to see what the force and effect of not having a fine would be. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Okay, let's try this. Can you guys hear me?
Much better.
Okay, perfect. So I'm muted on Zoom, but I'm talking to you through a phone. So kudos to technology here. So what I was trying to say earlier, and it's still relevant for me, and I'm going to spit it out now, is that, you know, on the concept of waiting for triggers or numbers or to statistics, that for myself, I'm not really willing to wait for a grandma or grandpa or mom or dad or brother or sister to become sick or worse, pass before we decide to do something. So that was what I was trying to spit out earlier. Lots has been chatted about. I support the motion as it's put forward right now. One of the things I was going to ask earlier was surrounding the timeline required. In the recommendation, the second paragraph of the recommendation, administration said that you know, it would allow them some time to collaborate or check in with the Chamber of Commerce and some business or some businesses or whatever. Just a question for administration: how much time is reasonable, do you think, to do that?
Theo?
You're muted still, I think.
Tika, were you talking with Rob today? Because I know you've started some of that work. Feel free. If not, I can take it.
No, thank you very much for the question, Councilor Van Newkirk. So we have actually already surveyed close to 300 businesses in the last couple of weeks as part of our COVID recovery operations. They 77% already are offering and have PPE available. This week, we've distributed almost 2,000 more masks to smaller independently owned businesses to make sure that they're prepared. So the feedback that we're getting, I don't have quantifiable stats around how many businesses per se would support this bylaw as is, but they are very well aware and are very comfortable with the concept of PPE being available for staff and for customers.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
From a timeline perspective, I know myself, I wouldn't want to see second reading come back any earlier than next week. From a timeline perspective, I know I myself wouldn't want to see second reading come back any earlier than next week. Because I think there's a fair bit of research and things going on in the region that still need to be clarified. So that's where I'm currently sitting, and possibly the week after.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was asking is because, oh, can you still hear me, Mayor?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and just to continue with my thoughts there, I was just asking around that timeline just to see, what was going to be reasonable for, a second reading to come back, because the next thing we have to decide is, if the second part of this, or the timing of the second motion. So anyways, I have some more thoughts on that I'll share at that time when we're on that subject. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. With respect to the masks in the public domain, with respect to our facilities, there are facilities, we have to control our facilities, and we have to be risk adverse to those facilities, and I get that. For us to start to mandate that against local businesses that are already self-governing, that are already doing COVID-19 parts, bits, and pieces, everything from shields to PPE to signage that says no mask, no service. I think that's where it stops. If we start taking the next step, which is we're going to mandate that you have to in your place of business, I think we've gone too far. Just like we're not going to go into somebody's home and say that everybody in that home has to have a mask on at all times. There's a sense of risk, and I get there has to be a tolerance to a certain risk. This thing's never going to be risk-free. I get that. And we have, all of us have somebody that's in those high-risk areas. I have two very senior parents that are also very sick in so many health different issues. And yes, we're doing everything we can to protect them. And we're taking our required steps. But to somehow create a situation whereby we're going to mandate a mask in all cases, in all areas, in all ways, in my opinion, is just gone way too far. And I think we need the province then to step in and say, this is what we expect. And Dr. Dina Henshaw was just on the radio and on TV just 2 hours ago, offering that she's never requested a mandatory mask requirement in the province. She's never done it. So to me, that's telling me loud and clear that we also have some self-governance that we got to deal with. And we have to take that into account. Everybody understands the COVID risk by now, because we've been staring at it since March. We all understand the science. We all understand the issues. And we have to be vigilant to ourselves as to how we handle this. But I don't want to go to the big brother step. To me, that takes it too far.
Oh, we lost Mayor Stewart.
You're up, Martin.
Yeah, that means I'm chairing if he doesn't come back on. How long do we give him?
Okay, well, if I can jump in, Deputy Mayor, on that note. Wait a second.
Let's give him what I'm going to suggest is that we give him 5 minutes to reconnect.
Oh, here he comes. Oh, there he is. Mayor Stewart?
I apologize. I lost the connection. Everybody froze. And so I hope I didn't miss too much. But I guess we'll pick back up with Councillor Van Newkirk, or sorry, I think it was Councillor Munkoff-Swain that was up next.
Oh.
Yeah, it was actually Dan Luck and then me. I think he was trying to chat. Sorry, you just.
Okay. Now that I have my screens open again, I have Councillors Barnhart, Daniluk, and Munkoff-Swain. So we'll go Councillor Daniluk, Councillor Barnhart, Councillor Munkoff-Swain, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I do appreciate the courtesy. So I guess the whole thing we're talking about here is I respect my colleagues' concern about, is this a half measure and not going far enough? There is some logic to that concern as well. But as we mentioned before earlier, I really struggle with the fact that the province has downloaded this to us. It's a health issue, non-municipality issue. But as we say, it is what it is. We are right now. So I'm comfortable with that which we can control, which is our own municipality property and assets and facilities. I don't think it's really our place to be dictating to businesses and private citizens how they should do things. Because maybe on Monday, Government of Alberta might say, okay, mandatory masks everywhere, including businesses. That could possibly happen. So I'm comfortable with first reading on option 3 at this point, review the situation, see what happens. But I'm not comfortable the fact that we have to debate this ourselves instead of being a provincial matter. So I do think the approach we're taking with option 3 is prudent. It keeps us controlling what we can control and doesn't force us to control other parts of the municipality in terms of businesses and people. So I think it's a balanced approach because I don't think it's really our responsibility to dictate health policy. I do respect, can be considered a half measure in some respects? Perhaps it might be, but it's a balanced half measure that we can control as a municipality and go from that point forward. So thank you, Mayor Stewart and Council.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Worship. As we're talking, and it appears there's pretty good consensus so far on our own facilities, and we have every right and every responsibility to keep people safe there. I'm wondering why it has to be a bylaw. Can it not be a city policy in situation? I'm throwing that.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Barnhart. So you're correct, an administrative policy could cover our facilities. The difference is that enforcement is more limited with that route, but it is an option.
And I think enforcement was some of our concerns. So that's why I'm wondering if we can perhaps see more information about that option. And you could think about it when it does come back and provide us with that information. Thank you.
Mayor Stewart, can I follow up on that?
Please.
Just to build off of what Tika was suggesting, if you recall, that was the first step that Edmonton took when they moved to level 2. They put in what they called an administrative control. So we could very easily do that. It would not require a bylaw, but as Tika said, there would be no way of enforcing it other than asking people to, abide by the or leave our building. So that could work.
Okay, Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of comments that was spoken about from councillors. So, we've heard everyone say, disappointed it's downloaded to us. Yeah, agreed. Complete lack of leadership from the province. But we've got a job now. We're the leaders of this community, so we need to step up and not follow suit. So I'm not down with that excuse. The comment around Dr. Hinshaw saying should never ask the province to implement a provincial-wide bylaw is different from her. She's also saying, we still recommend you wear these and everywhere you go, and that is in the public. So just by not asking the Premier not to do that, that's a political comment, not a health and safety comment. I guess the ultimate question I have is, and I should say this is the last place that we want to be. None of us want to be dictating, policy for business and all that sort of stuff. But here we are. Ultimately, the question that I'd be curious from people to answer is, what's the downside? So what's the downside to having people wear a mask when they're going shopping at a drugstore or a grocery store? What's the downside? Clearly there is upside. Scientific evidence shares that. I'd be curious if anyone can speak to the downside of that.
Administration?
Sure. From our perspective is that we are now controlling a private business's operation. If you look at the memorandum that was presented to the city of Edmonton, I thought it was interesting, and I mentioned this in an email, that they said they would not require a business owner to enforce the bylaw. So when I read that, it tells me that somebody walks into my business, I have the ability to say, put this mask on or leave, buy this mask from me or leave, or come on in, you don't need to wear a mask. So the bylaw that they're using in Edmonton is giving that right, which is not allowing us to enforce it anyway. The biggest lever for us is we wanted to let private business take care of, as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, take care of their safety requirements. They seem to be doing a good job of it. So I appreciate the City of Edmonton bylaw. It's exactly where I would go in terms of, not wanting to enforce it. It's a statement. They're more than an enforceable thing. But respectfully, you still didn't share any downside to doing it. I get not wanting to tell a business how to do it, and our businesses are doing a great job, right, of enforcing it. But it's also tough for them. And there are some businesses who, maybe don't want to do it for fear of losing customers, but it might be easier for them when they see that this is actually a citywide piece. So, I get no one wants to be in their space, but again, still no downside being shared. So, I won't go on about this anymore. Like I support the motion in front of us, the bylaw that's in front of us for us, and then I think we've heard from everyone else on the public versus private piece. Obviously disappointed, but I'm happy to support the motion that is on the floor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. At this time, we'll have Councillor Van Newkirk speak, and then we will vote on first reading, and then we'll move on to the other two motions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my comment is actually suited to the second motion here, so I'll just hang tough, and then maybe I could start the second conversation. Thank you.
Fair enough. Is there any further discussion on first reading of the bylaw in front of us?
Yes, sorry, John. And there was a discussion on timing before. I wasn't sure if that was around the second recommendation or the first one. Do we know when second and third reading are coming back to us? Is there any reason why we wouldn't go? I appreciate to Councillor Barnhart's point, we've got this late, but if we're all relatively unanimous, and is there a reason why we couldn't go all three? Does this, from a legislative perspective, do we need to do anything else, or can we run this through today if we wanted to?
If we wanted to, we could. I'm not going to vote in favor of third reading tonight, unanimous consent, because I think this is something that needs to be considered. And my intent would be to allow administration to go back as part of the second motion if it passes, and bring back some amendments and some things and some further comments. I still think minimum next week, but I would defer to the CAO to see about timelines on that for the week after. So right now, we're just considering first reading.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stewart. If I weigh in, that the timeline is completely within council's control. Depending on what the direction and amendments that you require, we could be ready to go when you are.
So my comment on that would be sooner the better, and respect not everyone's comfortable, ready to pass this right now and give administration time. But we're going to have school coming back in a month. I'd rather get this process and some of the kinks ironed out before we go back and before a lot of our population is going to be exposed in close quarters. So sooner the better for me.
Oh, fair enough. But just a note that schools are not within our mandate. That's within the provinces and the school trustees to look after. That's their jurisdiction.
Yeah, for sure. Not debating that. I'm just saying that a large part of our population is going to be going into schools where they're going to be in close proximity, and so not debating whether they should or not. But just the point is, we should get our bylaw in place in order time for us to be able to work through that.
Yeah.
Councillor Barnhart, comment?
Yes, I'm. Thank you, Worship. I'm just not clear why it has to be a bylaw. And since we don't have that information, I'm kind of conflicted about voting on a first reading tonight. I appreciate Councillor Mulkoff-Swain is ready to go all the way to third reading. I'm not there yet. So I do think the timeline of at least 1 or 2 weeks to get that information. That doesn't mean we can't still continue to encourage people. And I don't think even right now there's anything stopping our public facilities from putting up a sign saying you need to be wearing a mask. But that's where I'm sitting right now. It's not that I don't want to see us encourage mask wearing. I'm just not sure it has to be put into legislation if we're not needing to put fines in place or put people out on the street to enforce it. And why can't we put those policies in place right away? Why do we need to have a bylaw?
Mayor Stewart, can we take a shot at that?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll pass over to Director Cook.
Perfect, thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. I'll do my best, Councillor Barnhart, to answer your question. The reason or the rationale behind a bylaw, it allows the City of Beaumont municipal enforcement team, so bylaw officers and peace officers for the City of Beaumont to enforce the bylaw. Whether there's a fine or not, I would say is irrelevant, but it does give us the power to say we have a bylaw in place, much like our cannabis consumption bylaw or noise abatement bylaw, and any activities that are in violation of that bylaw must cease. So gives us that authority, and obviously we get that from the Municipal Government Act. That's the reason or the rationale from the bylaw perspective. If we were to move to a directive or a policy, that doesn't give us the muscle, if you will, in layman terms, to enforce it in the manner that the bylaw would. So for example, if an individual came into City Hall, for example, wasn't wearing a face covering if the bylaw was in place, one of our peace officers could ask them to leave in a proactive manner, encourage them to don a face covering, and of course, provide it to them or allow them the opportunity to retrieve one from their vehicle. Again, that gives us a little bit of that muscle to do that, whereas again, in a policy, it doesn't give our bylaw officers that opportunity. Hope I answered your question.
Yep.
I don't think
Thank you. Look, I mean, again, we're down to enforcement. And so, I think that's some of the penalties of a bylaw other than a fine. You're saying we're not going to allow you in our facility. We can ban people from our facilities now without a bylaw. So, our enforcement officers are going to be doing this rather than our staff in the facilities. Well, we don't have enough enforcement officers to do all of that. I don't think, but I mean, it just seems heavy-handed. So I'd like to see it come back with some thought on that.
Yeah, and I'd like council to have a think about that too, because I'm not necessarily sure. I agree with a fine or a bylaw with no fine. And so that discussion needs to be had. And I think some thought needs to be taken. As well, we're not in a hurry. We have no active cases that are currently on record in the City of Beaumont. So we can have a look and see what the effects are of the City of Edmonton bylaw and others that are in our region, which may help us make some effective decisions. So that's why I'm only advocating for first reading tonight. It gets it on the table, gets the discussion started, and gives it a minute starting.
Mayor, would I be able to jump in?
Sure. At some point, though, I'd really like to call this question.
For sure. I was holding this comment until the next section, but just a question for administration on enforcement. Maybe Mr. Cook, on enforcement, one of the things that I have concerns with is that our officers are trained in conflict management. They are trained in the enforcement of things. One of the concerns I have is, when we start downloading the enforcement onto the various attendants of facilities who may not have that conflict management training and may not be well suited to do that if we had a policy versus a bylaw. Just wondering what your thoughts on that idea might be.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Van Newkirk, for the question. To start with our peace officers and our bylaw officers, they do take training, everything from verbal judo through to conflict resolution management. I believe that training is also cascaded down into some of our city staff as well. We would encourage our staff to promote the bylaw, to recommend to our visitors that we do have a bylaw in place and that face coverings are required. And should a situation be encountered for which it either becomes confrontational or combative, we would encourage our staff to disengage, reach out to municipal enforcement, to attend the scene and to address the matter. Again, we want to be proactive with this. This is a proactive move. We have 0 cases right now. Like to keep it at 0 cases. Again, we don't want to see anybody get in harm's way, whether that's city staff or our residents, of course. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you bet. And my comment there is that masks are becoming a very polarizing issue, and people are going to get pretty excited about things, or there's a potential to. And you know, I'd rather we don't drag our feet on this. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak, Mayor.
Thank you very much. So before we move on to the second motion, I'm going to call the vote on first reading. All those in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
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 All those opposed? That's 1. First reading passes 6-1. Our second motion, that council direct administration to conduct a review regarding the mandatory use of face coverings in all indoor public spaces, including private businesses, and prepare draft amendments to bylaw 984-20 temporary face covering bylaw for council's consideration by when we bring back second reading. And I'll make that motion just to get it going. And so I know one of the things that I would like to see is we have a quick look at what Cochrane's done, because I think they hit the compromise point. Is there any other amendments besides the fine that council would like to see admin look into? Councillor Monkhouse.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking for a date here, so I'd want us to give them a date. So we'll do that. And the only for sound like a fear of sound like a broken record, I'll just say 2 things and then I'll shut up. So while we're away considering this, I'll ask council to consider what the downside is to having the second part, please. And the second part would be, consider what would it do for our businesses if they have to shut down if there is a second wave. I'm certainly not in favor of waiting till there's a problem before we act. Again, I don't see a downside here. So, let's think about our business community and give them some protection. So I'm looking forward to seeing what administration comes back, and trust that council will consider those comments. So I am in support of this recommendation, subject to a date, which I'm sure you'll give, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get to the date in a second. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to the answers to those questions that, for council to consider, those that Councillor Monkhouse-Swain put forward. It is a very polarizing issue. Myself, I'm not in the wait until a whole bunch of people are infected in Beaumont before we do something camp. That may not be a popular decision, but with some, but I'm not there. I was in 3 different businesses today, 2 outside of the community, where I wore a mask myself. I have glasses. I don't like doing it, but I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do for the people around me. I returned back to Beaumont. I went in a business where I had actually forgot my mask at home, and I was very much on the outside looking in. Most people were already wearing a mask and stuff, so I can see both sides of the argument. But for myself, I'm not willing to let our residents become statistics before we decide that we are going to act. So look forward to a date that is in the very near future to talk about this some more and have some discussion, and thank you.
Further discussion on the motion?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote, then we'll talk about the date. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Can we vote on it without a date?
Yeah, I'd like
So
to
just
include
did-
it.
Well, because the motion reads to come back with second reading, and then we'll discuss it when we want that to be shortly. So,
Okay.
Councillor Van Newkirk,
Yeah, so are we including a date with that motion or not putting a date with that motion? Sorry, I'm unclear.
there's no date in the motion. The motion is to bring it back with second reading, and we'll decide when second reading comes back here two seconds as soon as this vote's concluded.
Thank you for the clarity. I support that.
That carries unanimously. CAO, if we did this, give a week next Thursday, would that be acceptable to council and administration?
Yeah, I'll let council decide that. We'll be ready when you want us to be ready.
I think a week is reasonable. Council is okay with that.
Mayor Stewart,
I don't see any discussion. I'm going to assume it's reasonable. Councillor Danlock?
sorry,
Did you
Mayor
set a
Stewart,
date?
pardon me. Are you suggesting a week from today? You said Thursday, so well, it was a bit garbled on the phone. I apologize if it was garbled, but I thought you said a week from now. Then I heard Thursday. So a week from today or a week from Thursday being, just please clarify what you thought, what you said, please.
Yeah, I apologize. I have an unstable internet connection. I meant a week from today. So next week, Thursday.
So that would be the 6th, correct? August 6th?
Without a calendar in front of me, I'll have to accept that as yes.
August 6th is next Thursday.
Yes. Thanks
So,
for clarifying.
are we good for second and third next Thursday? Does that give us a little bit of time to gather that info and perhaps a quick chat with businesses?
Can I just intervene? I believe I'm on a SDAB hearing that night currently,
That is correct. There is an SDAB hearing scheduled for that.
and I have been scheduled to sit on it, and I can't do both at once.
What time is the SDAB hearing?
I think it's 5:30, but I'll check.
Is council okay with 3:30?
Your worship,
Councilor Hendricks?
I cannot promise that'll be available at that time.
Can you check and let us know, and we'll get this
Well, I
in.
can tell you already that the answer to that is no. I can't, but you guys can carry on.
Okay. Councilor Van Newkirk?
What about later?
No, it would have to be the 10th, the Monday. That's your list.
10th? So you're not available to the 10th?
No.
Is council okay if we wait for Councilor Hendricks on the 10th?
Yes.
Yes.
Fair enough. Councilor Hendricks will accommodate. Is that okay with admin, the 10th?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we'll have second reading on the 10th. Sorry, somebody was going to speak. I missed who.
Sorry, that's me. Can I, considering you were going to have Thursday and now you got to the following Monday, can we get it Thursday?
Oh, the documents out?
Yeah, just
Yeah, we can get it to you. Yeah, we can. Question I have though is, you said August 10th, what time?
Oh, sorry, 5 o'clock.
Okay.
All right, and so like following up on Councilor Hendricks' recommendation that we send a letter. Councilor Hendricks, would you like to make that motion?
I'll leave it to you to draft the wording so that the letter is signed based on your thoughts.
Okay, so the motion would, I'll draft a letter, but the motion being that council draft a letter to send to the Premier and the Minister of Health requesting that they come out with province-wide guidelines.
Yes. Amen to that.
Yep.
Is that clear enough?
Yep, clear enough.
Regarding mandatory masks.
Yes, sorry, regarding mandatory mask requirements.
Your worship, you can send them a tape of this discussion. Explain why.
you could keep it general. It doesn't have to be about masks. It could be about a lot of things, but I won't go there.
I believe that's called the election, Sam.
Discussion on the motion.
No.
All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries
Aye.
unanimously. Are there any other matters we need to discuss in relation to mandatory masks before we call this meeting tonight? And I thank everybody for their heartfelt discussion. It's been, like I said, this is an emotional discussion, and I can see council's falling on both sides of it. So appreciate it, and tough decisions ahead of us. So is there anything else before we call the meeting for members of council?
We're good. Thank you all.
Is there anything else for members of admin that you need from council before we call the meeting closed?
No, your worship, we're good. Thank you.
Therefore, thank you very much, and we'll see you all on the 10th. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Meeting is adjourned.